Hi, everybody. Joe Cioffi here. Weather in 5 days and 5 minutes. And tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, well, we're going to be talking about what really is a very quiet weather pattern across much of the United States. Although that's going to change on the West Coast. And we've got storm tracks that are taking storms to the west and south and another one that's going to go straight across the south. So we'll be dealing with that. We'll get into a little bit of long range. That's tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. And as we take a look at what's going on at the moment, it's pretty quiet across much of the east. It's by far not picture perfect, but you kind of play with the cards you get dealt. We have a weak high that's built down the coast. We have a low in northern Michigan earlier this morning. You can see the trailing fronts are down through southern Illinois and Missouri. This storm system really can't come to the east, so it's got to take a route that's going to be a little unusual. It's going to go south into the Appalachians and then redevelop along the coast of North and South Carolina, and then probably head straight out to the east toward Bermuda as a gale center. And that is about it as far as anything of consequence happening. We are going to be dealing with clouds with that. We certainly are today. You can see quite a bit of cloud cover. And you can also see a bit of a rotation back into the Great Lakes with this upper low and the surface low that goes with it that's dropping southeastward. Much of the south is beautiful today. Temperatures have warmed up back into the 50s in many locations, and the nice weather continues out through the plains and much of the Rockies. We do have some moisture and some heavier activity that is going to start coming in to the west. And here's what the radar looks like right now. Much of the east is quiet. We've got some precipitation from the west shores of Lake Erie down through western Ohio. It's snow up to the north. It's rain as you go further south into Kentucky. And again, we don't really see this as a consequence. There are a couple of models that are trying to show some light ocean effect snow showers tonight over parts of New Jersey. I don't really think that's a big deal, at least from what I see. We've got a little bit of rain coming into the Pacific Northwest, but nothing going on down in California, which is actually going to be the center of the action in the coming days. No severe weather to worry about going forward. As far as liquid uh, precipitation is concerned, melted precipitation over the next 7 days. So that takes us to next Tuesday. You can see it's actually quite active across the South with anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to areas of an inch and a half plus in Arkansas and northeastern Texas, the central Gulf Coast, and also along coastal North Carolina. Only a couple of hundredths being indicated in much of the northeast of the northern mid Atlantic, and that is really mostly with a cold front that's going to come through Thursday night and early Friday. And then you look at the west, especially for California, where we're talking about several to many inches of rain from San Diego all the way north to southwestern Oregon. Also, several to many inches of liquid precip over melted precip over the next 7 days in the Sierra Nevadas, and that is going to be likely in the form of snow. As far as snow goes, over the next 72 hours, we have some risk for a couple of inches, maybe a little bit more up in central and northern Maine. And then out in the west, we see higher probabilities, particularly in the Sierra Nevadas and in the higher elevations in Nevada and over into parts of Utah, seeing 50% or higher probabilities there. If we put up the 8-inch probability, it's all in the Sierra Nevadas. Some areas likely getting at least 8. We can even raise it up to 12. And we're seeing some 12-inch probabilities of 80% or higher in those areas. And in the long range, it's pretty much all there as far as snow is concerned. So we've got this disturbance. You can see the surface low in eastern Kentucky actually drops down all the way to North Georgia. They usually don't do that, but because of the way the upper pattern is set up with this omega block, everything is being forced to the south and east. So the low goes offshore, it strengthens as it moves out. I think we'll have a better day tomorrow with more of a west wind, so that should allow for some sun to finally break through. You'll notice in California tonight and Wednesday, the first surge of heavy rains and heavy mountain snows coming in. And now we're into Thursday, which I think should be also a nice day. We'll probably warm up in the 40s on Thursday ahead of a cold front that'll come through. And there might be a shower or two with that late Thursday night into early Friday. The front goes by. We'll turn a little colder and drier for the weekend. Doesn't look like we're going to get all that cold now from this system that's out to the east. Meanwhile, this California system moves eastward. And again, because of the way the block is set up, it's going to force this low to take a southern track, maybe not as far south as the GFS has it, but it still will be, I think, far enough south so that we don't really have anything to worry about as far as heavy rain or even just minor accumulating snows into the first part of next week. Now, the models are starting to come around to the idea that as we get after February 10th or 11th, that things are going to start to turn colder. We'll see if that plays out. We've been down this road a few times this winter. It was right on one occasion. It was wrong on a couple of others. So we'll see how that all plays when we look at the long range tonight and everything else on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time.